Welcome to tonight's session. And as I wrote in the invite, I propose that we talk about this using a couple of existing functions within MDriven that we have talked about before in some form or manner, and put them together to make this rather common need to produce static pages of data, of structured data. And I think I put that in the invite as well. The difference between a application that is mainly for maintaining structured data and the web at large, which is mostly for consuming data. And there's a small conflict between the two when it comes to usability and readability, etc. So it would be a good thing if we can combine these two needs. And that was what I was aiming to show tonight. Sounds good?
Yep.
Yeah. Good. So let's share present screen now then. Right. Screen is up, right? So this is, of course, just a convoluted example of how to do things, but I just simulate a very simple information systems with class 1 having a relation to class 2. So this is some kind of structured data that we might want to have in a static page at some point. So to show how that would how we handle this is I'm going to start up the local servers. And that's the turnkey server, and of course I can go to that one by clicking here and pulling that tab like so. So if I have an auto form here and I have a few class 1s that has an attribute 1 and has an image and has a list of class 2s. So attribute 1 has an image and has a list of class 2s with some property on them. Suppose that we want that this is part of some fancy e-shop somehow, and we want to publish our pages to be easily accessible by Google, or to index them and find all this information. And Google will probably not go into our application and wait for things to load, and it's wasteful to have Google load all the capabilities to change data, and this might be behind a closed door. You need to log in to change anything at all, etc. So it's just not a perfect fit for read-only and for publish and for mass use. And of course our application as it runs consumes a little bit of resources on the server side as well. So if we're thinking like thousands of users, that's probably okay in large scenarios, but millions of users, well, it's hardly likely that we're going to have millions of simultaneous users editing information. So we probably don't want to set up our server park for that capacity. It would be much better if we can steer the million users reading to reading something static that's totally stateless. I think Brian talked about this last time also, the need to have something completely stateless. Also, Bengt touched on this a couple of sessions ago, the need to transform detailed information into static web pages. So that's the setup, and to get this going, I've added a new class 1 static page, which has a one-to-one to the class 1, and this is where I'm going to store my HTML once I have it. So every class 1 is supposed to get one of these in the end. And how do I get the HTML, the generated HTML, into here? Well, how do I generate it in the first place? Good question. That's a view model which I call class 1 static, from this one transformation. So I'm going to open that one up, and well, it wasn't meant for viewing, so I'm gonna remove the placing hints on it. And the thing here is that it's a static transform. It requires a root. It does a few things like pulling the attribute 1. It follows the link class 2's and pulls the class 2's attribute 1. So and then it has this one I'm gonna talk about a little bit about. It has the template HTML and the template old. So I'm gonna mention those a bit later, and also the report file name. Then it takes the data from class 1, that's the image, and it also has mangled a variable to be the full URL to the image if we want to watch it, if we want to download the image, not as data but as having a web browser see the image. And that variable is set by this action up here that assigns it from using a function on OCL singleton. It does nothing fancy. I just put the logic within this method instead of repeating myself. So it's sort of make sure that we have a correct object identity to get to the image. And also when we work with the object identities, they are normally numbers to denote the class identity, but as we explain on the wiki, we can also use the class name to make them a bit more time persistent, since as we update the model, the numbers will shift, and if we store references to objects using numbers over a long time, and then we update the model, then we might have a bad cache pointing to the wrong things. So it's a bit of those things that goes on in there. So that's just doing the transform. Well, it actually doesn't do the transform, it just roots in a class 1 and then pulls in the data that's needed. So this one is used by this one, update class 1 static. So this is yet another view model. So this view model has one action that only does this simple thing. It says self, and now the root is a class 1 static page. So this one that's supposed to store the HTML. And it follows the link to its class 1 where the real data exists. And then we use the OCL function or operator XHTML report as string. So this is of course on the wiki, and so you can read all about that here, but basically what it does is follow this pattern that we have in the open document report generator with these tags that you can inject to get data from the view model definitions. So if you have something in the view model that's called a customer name, you can get to that data and replace it. So it's a template engine, you can say. So the template engine will take the root object class 1, which is the one pointing out in this direction over here, and then it says use this class 1 static transform view model as your transformer. So that's pretty cool. You take the class 1 that we have, and then you send in the view model, and then you ask this operator to turn everything into XHTML. So how does that happen? Well, so this is the transforming view model, that one that we looked at before. So it grabs all the data, and then the operator expects to find template HTML within this information set. If it finds that template HTML, and this is documented on the wiki, what different types of strategies you can have to inject the template. What's the how is the target environment where the tags will be found that we should replace. So initially I had it as just a string here, and I removed that, so I called that template HTML old, so it wouldn't collide with this important name, template HTML. Now it grabs it from the singleton, and where I have a attribute template class 1. So but if we peek a bit at the template HTML old, you can see that what the template should look like is the static HTML that we want to return, and it should have these percent and tag names, and these tag names are the names from the view model that we are in. And when we come here, let's see, when we do double percent plus, it means that we're going to iterate over a link. So class 2's, and that's this one, right? Class 2's. So it will iterate over this one. Oh, where did it go? And for each, it will find the outer tag and repeat these tags, and then for each it will do attribute 1, so that would be that attribute 1. So that's the idea, that you can take any data and inject it into a template engine and get the result back. So that is what happens when you run this action, and what the result back is then put into the HTML property of this the object that's root for this one, which is of type class 1 static page. So cool. Now we have the ability to do it, but when should we know when we need to do this? And here's the magic thing that we also have talked about before, and that's the ability to run things server-side. So we're going to edit the criteria for server-side execute for this view model. And then I push this button to make it available for server-side execute. But I skip all the settings and I just go for cached and auto-updated. This option subscribe to use data and persist subscriptions in DB. So to make this work, we need to turn this thing on the MDriven server. So if I were to go to the MDriven server, it's just going to check that. This is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. On cache invalidation. Once you have installed the MDriven server, you just push this one, and you can push it multiple times. It's no danger. If they are there, they are there. If they are not, they will be added. And you check this box, cache invalidation enabled. So if we then run this application as we do here, we can of course go to the auto form for this class 1 static page and see that indeed it has generated some stuff for us, which seems to be valid HTML. So that's good, and it's connected to a class 1. Right. And so we have the result, but how do we know that the result will be updated when we change our data in class 1, for example? So let's try that. I'm gonna open that class 1. So now this is the static page, and let's say that we're gonna edit a text here, everyone. And what should have happened now is that if I go to cache invalidation, I can see that the latest invalidated, it has found a few things that has been invalidated, and as things are updated, I can see that this one is updated. So the server-side view model has executed for me in the background. Really low energy style, and this generated HTML was then updated for me. So good. What can we use this updated or static HTML for? So I made another page here. I'm gonna open that one, and this is rendering the static HTML. So let's see, class 1 static page display. So that's yet another view model. And this one is rooted in class 1 static page, and it has only one attribute, the HTML, and it has a tag value on it stating that it should be data is HTML. So you shouldn't just write the data, because then we will get the text. We want to treat it as HTML. And then I just dragged it out to cover the whole screen. So that would be one way to, and also I think I set a tag value on this one to make it MVC. So now it's not loading Angular or things like that. It's just this static web page showing here, and it's just the same sort of HTML that we saw in the generated output. So that's one way to show it. But then it dawned on me that we have this function to pull any data from the server when we need to display images, for example. So this image is called by get image, and then it has an identity and to get the right image. So I use that to actually get the image pulled from here into the static HTML. What if we were to amend this get image function to also be able to return the static HTML? So I made a few updates earlier, and let's see if I have the finished. So I want to be able to just call the server with get image and send in a identity and pointing out which attribute I want to show, and then get the static HTML straight up, no questions asked. So this is very low overhead on the data. Still, it will be well, of course, now it's MVC, so it won't update automatically if the user doesn't refresh it. But as the user refresh it, if there's a update to the underlying data, so let's try that again. Getting a lot of tabs now. So let's add a new class 2. Does it work? So I'm going to save that one and head back here and make sure that it's in the list. And hasn't worked yet. So if we keep on refreshing this, we get a feel for how long it will take. So now it's there. Does it work? So what happened was that there's yet another object in the list of class 2s, and the template engine saw that we want to follow the class 2s and duplicate the actually we I haven't shown you the template. So the template is then put into the singleton in a field. So I'm gonna open up that one in a separate tab and open up the singleton. So this is my template. So if I change the template, and save that, what will happen then? Well, since the template was part of the view model doing the transformation, the template itself is also part of the subscriptions.
That was an unexpected coolness.
Yeah. So if you want to, if you have a lot of static web pages and well, you can have code to generate the template if you want, or you can have the template as I do now in a property and pour it in, or maybe you have another system doing the templates, a good designer engine, and you pull data from there and put it into this field, and then all the pages depending on it will be regenerated automatically as an effect of the cache invalidation. So this really brings together, I think, in a good way, the ability to keep structured data in high precision, but still not being stuck with a specific way to use that data. And within the MDriven system and the MDriven turnkey server, you could just transform this structured data in a very efficient and low-cost manner, just in time as it changes. And this is one of the biggest problems in computer science, to manage cache invalidation. Of course, it's impossible to manage cache invalidation. How should you know when something that your cache is dependent upon needs to update? And the way we solve it is that, since we have this controlled environment with the view models, and we can see exactly what data, what part of the schema or the model is actually used in the transform, we can put the exact subscriptions and store those. And we also have the absolute control of all the saves passing through our inspector, and it does it in a very unintrusive way. We just store away what's being saved and save it for later, and when we have a little bit of time, we see if the things we have saved has any impact of any of the stored caches, and if so, we just invalidate those. And when we have a little bit of more time again, we see, are there any caches that are invalidated, and then we try to update them. And how do we update them? Well, of course, we update them by calling this view model, and that calls this action that does the transformation, and then you have a new static HTML page. Pretty cool, right?
It is. I haven't seen it put together like this before. And important is that it's not time-based. You know, most caching mechanisms, you have like 10 minutes and you serve up the same thing for 10 minutes and then you check back. You throw what you have in the cache, and the next one that comes along, they wait for the cache to fetch again, and then you cache that for 10 or 15 or whatever minutes you have set. But this is not that kind of cache. This is based upon analyzing changes when they happen.
So the normal scenario is that you have like maybe 10 million things that you have static pages for, and there's only a very small set of those that are actually changed each day. And in order to make any sense of the caching, you need to guess which one should we update. And maybe on the night you would take some time and then just refresh them all, or at least once a week refresh them all, that you can never know if you missed something. So this is a much more stringent way to be sure that what's in there will be detected and maintained. So it's very efficient. It's a good fit if you have hundreds of millions of objects and you would want static pages for those.
And then this would be much more indexable by Google, for example, search engines, because they can follow that. And of course, your templates could include links in between the pages. So you basically generate a complete site. by doing it like this. And then there would be a clickable, cacheable, static website separate from your edit user interface. And then if you had users that actually had the right to edit, you could put a link on each page that says edit, and then it jumps to the corresponding page with edit features.
Yeah. So one of the scenarios that we have is that we have a large production system that's getting more and more complex by the month, because the experts deciding what should go into the system get more and more savvy in structuring their information. And then we have a big population that only really wants to read. They only want to see what the expert has to say. And these two use cases are sort of not compatible. The expert wants to have a screen with lots of information that's relevant for doing the task at this time, and nothing about other stuff that's not important for this task. And the reader wants a great overview of the broad strokes of things, not necessarily the nitty-gritty details, and not necessarily the decision data that we must make available to the expert in order for them to be able to do their work. That's just things that we need to display in order for them to know what state the new to progress the system in. But a reader doesn't care about those things at all, because it's not their job. And if we could separate the readers from the writers, I think it's much to be gained. And of course, you can always do this with separate systems and export everything to another database to make a web out of that. But if you have limited resources and you really don't want to have the burden to have multiple descriptions of your system. You want one description of your system. You want one understanding of your system. You want it all to tie together so that you can, when someone right-click an attribute in your model and thinks, this is never used, I haven't seen this used in the system, and then they right-click it and it says, whoa, it's used by the thing that generates the static HTML. Oh, so you better keep that. And that kind of knowledge that you otherwise would need a lot of headroom or documentation that no one reads anyway. So everything is online and available at your fingers. That's the main benefits of this. Hej Simon, jag är möte. Yeah, pretty cool. I think at least.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're a hard bunch to impress.
Thinking about use cases at work, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see some good ones, so I think I'll look into it.
Mm. Yeah, of course, and this is HTML, and maybe you want to produce documents ahead of time to keep them for historic purposes or something like that, and or anything that. Well, the cache invalidation is much bigger use case than just this, because the cache invalidation makes it very easy to have things that are derived but still persistent. So why would you want something to be both derived and persistent? Well, derived because it depends on other stuff, so that's obvious. But why persistent? Well, you might want to index it and search on it. So having the ability to make something persistent derived is a really good thing to make users find things. Even
Also for
complex ones.
performance, of course.
Yeah, you can always
Don't
find
have to
it.
calculate it.
If you're prepared to search in memory, you can always find it, of course. But if you have millions, that's not an option.
So this would be extendable then to that you don't save it and show it the way you did now. But you could, of course, send this off to a separate web server when you generate the page or whatever you generate. And then you have another system, for example, on the outside of a firewall that just serves up ready consumables. So, and then you don't have Google or Bing, if anyone uses that, to hammer on your valuable, in-memory system. And so, and then you could, of course, also then just put some like, now I lost the name, but Hans, you said it to me when last time I said caching, like Cloudflare.
Yeah.
If you want to put Cloudflare in front of this, and you'll get someone who can handle an enormous amount of traffic. And then they might introduce timed cache, but it's still a good way to structure it. You have the core editing, you generate static pages, you store them on a more lightweight web server, and then you might put out caches, and those, if you're running these globally, of course you could just cache it, let it spread to different parts of the world, and it would be very, very fast to get all this data. So several reasons I find this interesting.
And if anyone's doing Power BI stuff, I'm sure you're familiar with the total lack of cache invalidation detection that's available in that setup. You need to refresh the cube by pulling all the data and recalculate everything, and you typically do that once a night, or if it's really real time, you do it once an hour. But if you have this possibility to actually detect when production data changes in a precision manner and feed it to Power BI, and then you can have a cache invalidation module that calls a REST API to kick off the Power BI refresh. So then you will have a much more online cube without wasting the resources that you normally do when you just refresh with nothing new in there.
Hans?
Yes.
Could we have a look at the cache invalidation UI on the MDriven server, maybe? Maybe it's self-explanatory to you, but I think this is a good moment.
Yeah, so it's it hasn't been given that lot of love yet, but as we see usage pick up, we will probably revisit it to work on it more. Let's see where we had it. I'm gonna go here and then click the find the server and log in. Oh no, I say never, but it always asks me. So no, the cache invalidation.
Oh, okay.
So this
is new, right?
what was that?
This is a little bit new, I guess. I haven't seen.
So yes, it has been updated a few months ago, but what this tells you is what caches are currently invalidated, and I'm not sure why these are invalidated. Say they are invalidated now. I think I have switched back and forth between models, and these are from another model. I think they have shouldn't be here. If I change, let's see. Now I'm in the application. I'm gonna put a 1 here and save, and I had expected to see 1 new here. I'm not sure why I don't. List latest invalidated. List latest updated. Okay. So what we do is that we allow you to see what has the latest invalidation times on them. So they are not really only the currently invalidated, but the ones that has been invalidated in near time. And these are the ones that has been updated in near time. And these are the oldest that has been updated, why you want to see those, and the oldest that has been invalidated. So that could be interesting if you have millions of these. You want to see if you have a lot of cache modules that sort of are stale for some reason. They shouldn't be, but if the data doesn't change, the data they subscribe to doesn't change, then of course they shouldn't be updated. So that's okay. They can be very old. That's the correct term. So this one is, let's see. Where did it go? Everything moves. So if so this was the hello everyone. So hello everyone says over there. Okay. If I take, no, I was supposed to see which number this one has. 109. So 109 should be it's here. So this is the one. So I was correct. These are from some older experiments, so these shouldn't show. Bad demo. And if I take this one, so the cache module identity is 17, but the root object for this cache module is 109. And I can get the manifest rows, which basically are the subscriptions for this 109 by pasting that one in there. I thought, the cache module ID, I read it wrong. So the cache module ID is 17. So this is everything that we have saved in the manifest for this cache module. This is the manifest row ID, and this is the owning cache modules ID, so the 17. And this is the root, or not necessarily the root, but the object's ID of class 1, and its attribute 1 that we subscribe to. And this is class 1, and we subscribe to the link to static page, and we subscribe to the link to the class 2s and the image of class 1. And then all these things on every class 2, different IDs on these, we subscribe to the attribute 1. So it's very efficient. If there was an attribute 2 on the class 2 and that changed, we wouldn't notice. We wouldn't need to refresh our cache because we only subscribe to attribute 1. And why do we only subscribe to attribute 1? well, attribute 1 was the only one available to us once we did the transformation, the only one we used doing the transformation. So that's important. And then we also subscribe to the singleton, the template class 1 attribute, so that we will detect that. So everything is very mechanical and very cost effective for getting this kind of functionality.
And one thing that is important to point out maybe is that so the subscription to the link info here means that if something is added to a link, that also invalidates the cache module. So
Correct.
it is not only what is in it that is looked at, you could say, because it also detects what should be in it.
Yes. So exactly. So that's kind of the magic, that we detect if there are new objects added to this association. Then we invalidate this particular cache for this number 17, and then that's fine. It's just invalidated, and the invalidations can be controlled by a priority that you can set in the that's in the documentation in the wiki somewhere. So and the MDriven server will work on these in the same manner it works on other server-side jobs, and they will show up in the work info log as whenever one cache module is updated, the name of that cache module is notified here. Yeah. All right. And all of this is available in this is except the thing where we actually allow download of text as and presenting it as HTML with get image. That one is new, but everything else I've shown is available since long time ago.
Great, thanks.
So I've had a lot of need in the past to detect or remember, try to remember all the places that will affect this generated piece of information. Like there's a specific name that depends on the weight of something else. So the weight in grams should be part of the name. And whenever all this structured data changed in multiple objects all over the place, we needed to remember that we should invalidate or recalculate the name. And that works when everyone is on their toes, but as time goes by, it stops working. Someone forgets one crucial part, that, oh, I changed that one, I allowed change of that, and the name is now out of date. So it removes, having a cache invalidation that you can trust and that works removes so much hassle of trying to find side effects of things you do.
And Hans, correct me if I'm wrong, but this works also if you're accessing derived attributes and things like that. Because if I remember correctly, the way it works is that it actually it runs the view model to fetch all the data, and then it monitors what access that has. I mean, what data is accessed to generate the result. So even if you have derived relationships, derived attributes, whatever it is, it catches it all like a big net and puts that into the caching thing. So you can build as complex as you like in the model, and that's what you meant, and not think about how this is done, and it will still.
Yeah, and work. Of course, if you from time to time you might want to revise your thinking, because if you look into a cache module and you notice that the manifest is like 10,000 rows, then your cache module is looking at really a lot of things, and that might be okay. But if one of those things is changing really often, and then there will be a lot of work to redo this cache module, and then you can always redesign to think that, can I split this up into 2 passes and make the one that changes fast and make that really small to update that thing, and then we store that as a persistent derived attribute, and then we use that one in another cache module. So the ones that are really big doesn't get invalidated and thus updated all the time. But that's to tuning. It's always tuning. Once you have a lot of data in your system, it's time to tune, and that job never really stops. And of course you can tune with brute force, throwing CPU and stronger database engines on it, but that will only take you so far. You can also tune with thinking. Why is this happening, and what's affecting what, and what makes things tick?
We're almost out of time, but I'll just mention another way that is connected to updating things and noticing that there is a way. If you have an external system and you might thinking, yeah, but this isn't MDriven supported, so how will this work? Or I have a connection to an old reverse engineered database. Well, there's actually a way to subscribe to that in a SQL Server, for example. But however you find out that things change, you can then call an OCL operation that says that, you should mark this dirty because, that has changed this object, and then all the other mechanics. So there are ways to manually tell an MDriven server here that things should be recalculated. And we use that in reverse engineered or databases that are not fully under MDriven control.
All right. So thank you everyone for showing up tonight, and see you in 2 weeks, and we will think of something else to talk about. And I got your email, Damien, on suggesting that the way to use the debugger in the designer to actually change the model itself to reduce tedious manual updates on a lot of stuff, or finding where have I used this. It might be a good topic.
Damien, have you seen a few examples of that is available in the wiki?
No, Hans had sent me some. I didn't look in the wiki. So Hans had done some massaging of my model, and he'd shown me some OCL work that he'd done inside the development environment to massage the model. And as far as I understand it, that's new to MDriven. That's not part of the older eco space, and so it might be valuable to know more about basically your working metadata, right? Your traversing in the programming environment. That can be useful.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what we have available.
If you go to the wiki, the wiki, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and use there's, for example, one page using the model debugger to change the model itself.
Okay.
Just go to model debugger, change model or something, search for that, and you'll find, some examples and some snippets like how do I rename a class in your model everywhere, or adding or removing tag values in your model, and how to add them and setting model classes to use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are things there to at least maybe bootstrap you a little bit into that area.
Yeah. I'm going to become more of a pain in the butt because I'm shifting within the next 3 to 6 months. I'm expecting I'm going to be pretty knee deep in the new tool, which I'm excited for, but I unfortunately probably going to have create more dust, right, as I drive down this new road.
Yeah. Sorry. There's if you click there for background, see using the model. Yeah, so I think that's like the main page. Yeah. We're looking forward to the butt pain, Damien. I don't know if that is a proper way to say things.
I'm excited too, but I know that I'm gonna hit a few brick walls.
But it is a very powerful way to do things. Actually, when I wrote those pages when I was doing a major reverse engineering job. That's when I used most of these, because you want to rename things en masse, you want to update, you want to set tag values, and there's also something in there. If you look at validating or database corruption, I use the same thing for, although it's very rare with database corruption, it can happen when you evolve models, or especially then if you have an old database that might not be perfect. You need to find what can wreck your persistence mapper, by pointing wild things all over the place or missing links or stuff. So I generate SQL out from the model in that case. And sometimes, after a while, I generate out that SQL and I just put it onto my SQL server and let it check all the linking in between.
Yeah. The only database corruption I've ever seen has been my fault, and it's been with embedded associations.
So
where
we have had a history of strangeness that links pointing the wrong way, and after we introduced, we started to suspect that it had to do with the model updates that old clients were writing to a new schema, or new schemas were writing to an old model. And we introduced in MDriven server a stop to each update command is also sending along the checksum for the model, and we check that they are equal, and if they're not, you're not allowed to save. And since that day, there hasn't been a single broken link.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is true, Hans, I think, but I have managed to make really weird model changes. And I just, I think one thing that can go wrong is if you ask it to change a class from a linked class into an ordinary class or something like it. So if you do really, like dangerous remodeling things and you just push them. Yeah, I have
and renaming things and reusing the old name before telling the database that you were in the middle of something.
Yeah. So, but I kind of think that kind of behavior can't really be captured by the Evolve engine, because how can it know if I don't even tell it what I'm doing?
So we need to finish up. Thank you very much for attending. See you in 2 weeks, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.